Power rarely begins in crowds. Niccolò Machiavelli did not learn the nature of power while standing among cheering allies or loyal companions. He learned it while sitting alone, dismissed from public office, accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, tortured, and finally exiled from Florence. Before writing The Prince, he had already seen something most people never notice. Men do not lose control when they are attacked. They lose control when they are surrounded. Because company creates pressure, agreement creates hesitation, and belonging creates compromise. Machiavelli spent years inside royal courts, watching rulers negotiate alliances that would collapse within months, watching friendships form publicly and dissolve privately, watching men speak loyalty in daylight and plot advantage at night. And he wrote something deeply uncomfortable. A prince must learn how not to be good, not because goodness is useless, but because predictable goodness becomes usable. When you are surrounded by expectation, you are expected to behave in ways that others can predict, to respond with politeness, to forgive with speed, to explain with patience, to agree with humility. And anything predictable can be directed. Solitude removes that predictability. A man alone does not need to soften his decisions for approval. A man alone does not need to delay his judgment for consensus. A man alone does not need to explain his ambition to maintain harmony. He may be slower socially, but he becomes faster strategically. Machiavelli noticed that rulers who depended emotionally on their advisors were easier to manipulate than rulers who depended intellectually on them, because emotional dependence creates negotiation weakness. If you need people to feel comfortable around you, you must behave in ways that protect their comfort. If you need to feel accepted by your circle, you must limit your disagreement to avoid their distance. And eventually, your truth becomes edited for belonging. That is why Machiavelli warned against surrounding oneself with flatterers. Not because praise is evil, but because praise encourages conformity. A ruler who hears constant agreement begins to fear isolation more than error. And once fear of isolation becomes stronger than fear of failure, decision quality collapses. Solitude restores internal authority. When you sit without applause, you begin to ask different questions. Is this plan effective or simply popular? Is this alliance useful or emotionally safe? Is this delay strategic or socially comfortable? In company, many decisions are made to avoid tension. Alone, decisions are made to avoid consequence, and consequence is what determines survival. Machiavelli did not romanticize loneliness. He treated it as preparation. In exile, he described his routine in a letter. During the day, he worked in the fields among peasants, but at night, he changed into formal court clothing and entered his study. There, alone, he read ancient historians and spoke, in his own words, with the dead. He held conversations with Livy, with Tacitus, with Plutarch, and from those solitary dialogues, he built political strategy. Because alone, you can think without interruption from approval. Approval creates urgency. Urgency creates error. Error creates dependency. A ruler who cannot tolerate quiet will eventually tolerate influence. This is why Machiavelli believed that independence begins with emotional distance. Not distance from people, but distance from their expectations. If your self-worth depends on being included, you will avoid decisions that risk exclusion. If your identity depends on agreement, you will adjust truth to preserve consensus. But if you are already comfortable standing alone, exclusion loses its threat. And once exclusion loses its threat, pressure loses its leverage. In politics, in negotiation, in leadership, leverage often comes from the ability to walk away. And only those who can stand alone can leave without fear. Machiavelli watched alliances collapse repeatedly because rulers feared losing allies more than losing advantage. So they stayed longer than strategy required, agreed more than logic supported, trusted more than evidence justified, not because they were naive, but because they were socially dependent. Solitude reduces that dependency. When you are used to operating without constant reassurance, reassurance becomes optional. When you are used to making decisions without consensus, disagreement becomes tolerable. And tolerable disagreement is one of the most valuable protections in leadership. Because leaders are rarely destroyed by enemies immediately. They are eroded by compromise, slowly. Compromise to maintain popularity. Compromise to avoid discomfort. Compromise to preserve belonging. Until their position becomes symbolic instead of structural. Machiavelli believed that leaders should aim to be respected rather than loved when both are not possible. Because love depends on perception, and perception changes with circumstance. Respect depends on consistency, and consistency survives opinion. But consistency requires independence, and independence is rehearsed in solitude. A man alone can observe his own patterns without performance. Notice where he seeks validation. Notice where he delays for approval. Notice where he speaks to impress rather than to inform. In crowds, performance becomes habit. You speak louder than necessary, explain longer than required, agree faster than advisable. Alone, performance becomes unnecessary, and unnecessary behavior fades. This is why Machiavelli saw solitude not as absence, but as filtering. It filters your motivations, filters your loyalties, filters your ambitions, separates what you truly want from what you want others to approve of. Many ambitions collapse in private because they were borrowed from admiration. Many plans dissolve in silence because they depended on encouragement. And what survives solitude often deserves execution. Solitude also protects emotional privacy. Machiavelli observed how easily rivals extracted information through reaction. A visible frustration revealed insecurity. A visible excitement revealed desire. Even celebration could be used as intelligence. If you celebrate too early, opponents learn your priorities. If you react too strongly, opponents learn your triggers. But when emotional processing occurs in private, display becomes deliberate. You still feel anger, but you show composure. You still feel fear, but you display calculation. You still feel desire, but you project neutrality. This does not make you dishonest, it makes you unreadable. And unreadability increases caution in others. Cautious opponents make fewer bold moves. Machiavelli valued caution more than kindness in political opponents. Because caution slows aggression. And unpredictability creates caution. Solitude allows unpredictability to form naturally. Without pressure to conform to group tone, you respond based on strategy rather than expectation. Your silence becomes informational scarcity, and scarcity changes behavior around you. People prepare more before approaching you, clarify their requests before presenting them, structure arguments before delivering them, because they cannot rely on instant approval. In this way, solitude improves not only your thinking, but their preparation. Machiavelli would argue that many people fear being alone because they equate absence with irrelevance. If I am not included, I must not matter. If I am not consulted, I must not be valuable. If I am not invited, I must not be needed. But influence is not measured by frequency of contact. It is measured by consequence of absence. If your absence creates no difficulty, your presence creates no advantage. Solitude gives you the space to build irreplaceability, to develop skills without observation, form plans without commentary, test ideas without public expectation. Public progress invites public pressure. Private progress invites strategic surprise. Machiavelli admired leaders who appeared calm publicly because their preparation occurred privately. He understood that visible action should be minimal and effective, not constant, but decisive. And decisive action requires clarity. Clarity requires distance from noise. Machiavelli also noticed something else during his years in exile. The men who feared being alone were the easiest to rush, because urgency is social. When you feel watched, you feel timed. When you feel timed, you feel pressured. When you feel pressured, you decide faster than your strategy allows. Courts were full of fast decisions, not because rulers were impulsive, but because they were surrounded. Advisors waiting, nobles observing, rivals measuring hesitation. Silence in a room full of people becomes uncomfortable. So leaders speak to break it. Agree to soften it, commit to escape it. But the one who is comfortable in silence is comfortable in delay, and delay is often protection. Machiavelli described how many political disasters were not caused by wrong intentions, but by early commitments. Agreements made before full information arrived. Promises made before consequences were calculated. Alone, you can wait. Waiting in private does not look like weakness. Waiting in public often does. That difference changes outcomes. A man who cannot tolerate private doubt will rush into public certainty, and public certainty binds you to decisions you may not have chosen with time. Solitude gives you rehearsal space for uncertainty. You can test an idea mentally without defending it socially. Consider a plan without presenting it politically. Question an alliance without announcing suspicion. Doubt becomes internal analysis instead of external instability. And internal analysis is safer. Machiavelli wrote that wise rulers keep counsel few, not because others are useless, but because counsel is influence. The more voices you depend on emotionally, the harder it becomes to contradict them later. Gratitude creates bias. Familiarity creates loyalty. Loyalty creates hesitation, and hesitation in critical moments can destroy advantage. Solitude protects judgment from gratitude pressure. If you are used to operating alone, you can accept help without surrendering independence. Advice becomes input, not direction. You listen, but you decide, because ultimate responsibility remains internal. Another thing Machiavelli observed was how crowds distort fear. In groups, fear multiplies. One anxious advisor infects another. One rumor spreads into certainty. One concern becomes consensus. And soon, a manageable risk becomes an emotional emergency. Alone, fear reduces to probability. You ask, what can actually happen? How likely is it? What is the cost? What is the recovery? Emotion becomes calculation, and calculation stabilizes action. This is why many of Machiavelli's most admired rulers withdrew periodically from public life. Not permanently, but strategically. They retreated to think, not because they lacked courage, but because they valued clarity more than applause. Public life is performance-heavy. Private life is analysis-friendly. In performance, you manage perception. In analysis, you manage outcome. Both are necessary, but analysis must come first. Otherwise, perception drives action, and perception-driven action seeks approval more than advantage. Machiavelli believed the worst leaders were those who began to enjoy approval too much. Because once approval becomes pleasant, disagreement becomes painful, and painful disagreement is avoided. So they surround themselves with agreeable advisors. Remove critics, ignore warnings, not out of arrogance, but out of comfort. Comfort creates blind spots. Solitude interrupts comfort. It exposes weaknesses without audience, forces confrontation with your own inconsistencies, your own fears, your own ambitions that may not be socially acceptable, and that confrontation is uncomfortable. But strategic discomfort now prevents public embarrassment later. Machiavelli's exile taught him this directly. Removed from court influence, he saw how much of his earlier thinking had been shaped by institutional expectation. What was considered appropriate, what was politically safe. Alone, those expectations disappeared, and with them, unnecessary caution. He began writing more directly, analyzing power without moral performance, describing rulers as they behaved, not as they pretended to behave. And that honesty became dangerous, because it removed the illusion that leadership is purely virtuous. Instead, it revealed leadership as adaptive. sometimes generous, sometimes strict, sometimes forgiving, sometimes decisive. The ability to switch between modes without guilt requires internal permission, and internal permission develops in solitude. When you spend time alone, you become less dependent on immediate validation. You can act without explaining instantly, correct without apologizing prematurely. You can be firm without announcing justification. Machiavelli warned that leaders who constantly justify themselves lose authority, because justification implies that permission is needed. Authority decides, then explains only where necessary. Not to satisfy curiosity, but to maintain order. Solitude trains you to separate those two audiences. Some people deserve explanation: your allies, your mission partners, those affected by your decisions. Others deserve only outcome. And when you are alone enough to tolerate misunderstanding, you stop explaining to those who cannot influence consequence. Misunderstanding becomes tolerable, and tolerable misunderstanding reduces manipulation, because manipulation often begins with emotional interrogation. Why did you do this? What were you thinking? Don't you care about? Questions that demand immediate emotional disclosure. If you are uncomfortable in silence, you answer quickly. If you are comfortable alone, you pause, and pause disrupts pressure. Machiavelli believed that rulers should avoid appearing indecisive, but should also avoid appearing easily moved. Easily moved leaders are tested more often. Calmly unresponsive leaders are tested less, because effort seems wasted. Solitude increases calmness under pressure because you are familiar with your own emotional reactions. You have seen them privately, felt them fully. So when insult or crisis appears publicly, it is not new, it is recognized. And recognition reduces escalation. You do not react to surprise, you respond to pattern. Another strategic benefit of solitude is that it removes imitation pressure. In groups, people mirror tone, humor, confidence levels, risk tolerance. Ambition becomes moderated to maintain harmony. But alone, ambition can grow without comparison. You are not calibrating against others constantly, not measuring your progress socially. So your standards become self-referenced. And self-referenced standards are harder to negotiate downward, because they are not maintained for appearance, they are maintained for outcome. Machiavelli would argue that leaders who depend on applause will eventually follow applause, but leaders who depend on consequence will follow strategy. Solitude shifts dependency from approval to outcome, from comfort to position, from noise to clarity. And over time, something subtle changes. You speak less, but with precision. Promise less, but deliver consistently. Explain less, but decide firmly. Your presence becomes quieter, but heavier. People may not always understand your process, but they begin to respect your stability, because you are not easily moved by trend, not easily rushed by urgency, not easily persuaded by sympathy. And sympathy is one of the most effective political tools. If someone can make you feel responsible for their comfort, they can influence your decision. But if you are accustomed to standing alone, you can evaluate requests without absorbing emotional pressure. You can say no without apology. And apology, Machiavelli noted, weakens negotiation position when unnecessary, because it signals regret, and regret invites revision. Solitude teaches you when regret is real, and when it is simply social expectation. Not every refusal deserves remorse. Some deserve confidence. In the end, Machiavelli did not suggest that leaders live in isolation. He suggested that they visit it regularly, like sharpening a blade, returning to silence to recalibrate judgment, to test whether current alliances still serve strategy, whether current plans still align with consequence. Alone, you can ask dangerous questions. Am I choosing this because it works, or because it is liked? Am I staying here because it is useful, or because it is familiar? Am I delaying this because it is risky, or because it is unpopular. And answers that survive silence are usually reliable. Solitude is not absence of support. It is rehearsal for independence. So if you find yourself alone more often than you expected, do not assume it is punishment. It may be preparation. If this helped you see solitude differently, stay with the channel. Subscribe for more strategy and psychology lessons drawn from real political thinking. Comment what topic you want next. And share this with someone who thinks being alone means being behind, when sometimes it means being ahead.